The conference room on the 42nd floor of a Beijing skyscraper overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows tinted against the spring sun. 5 men sat around a mahogany table, each representing a different arm of Chinese power: trade, military, technology, intelligence, diplomacy. They'd been summoned by a single directive from the top: prepare scenarios for November 10, 2026. The day the truce expires. Trump will extend it, said the diplomat, a silver-haired veteran who'd spent 3 decades reading American presidents. He needs a win before midterms. He'll claim victory: we'll buy more soybeans, everyone goes home happy. The intelligence officer shook his head. You're thinking rationally. Trump doesn't operate that way. Look at the pattern. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a timeline. April 2025, tariffs explode. May 2025, temporary deal. October 2025, another meeting. November 2025, extension. Always the same dance. Build crisis, claim breakthrough, repeat. He's not negotiating, he's campaigning. Every deal is a photo op. The military officer, youngest in the room but carrying the weight of the Liberation Army behind his words, spoke carefully. The question isn't what Trump wants. It's what happens if Taiwan moves while he's distracted. Our window closes in 2027 when their new submarines arrive. If we act in 2026, does Trump defend them? Can he defend them? Silence fell like snow, because everyone in that room knew the answer. And 12 time zones away, in a similar room in Washington, American officials were asking the same question. And neither side knew what the other would do. This was 2026. The year of questions without answers. The year when 2 superpowers played chicken with the global economy while pretending everything was fine. The year when the future of semiconductors, soybeans, rare earths, and democracy itself hung on whether 2 men, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, could trust each other for 90 more days. Spoiler: they couldn't. Trump had been tweeting about China since 2011. China is ripping us off became his mantra, his political catechism, the foundation of everything that followed. When he returned to the White House in January 2025, he brought that obsession with him, refined and weaponized. Within weeks, tariffs had jumped from 2.5% to over 27%, Depression-era levels, economists warned, catastrophic levels. Markets crashed. Trump paused. Tariffs dropped to 16.8%. Markets rallied. Trump declared victory. It was all choreography. Trump understood instinctively what took others years to learn. Markets don't react to reality, they react to expectations. Create crisis, manage expectations, control reality. On April 2, 2025, he'd announced Liberation Day, tariffs, a term so absurd, so Trumpian, that it almost obscured the economic bomb he'd just dropped. Reciprocal tariffs on 90 countries. A 10% baseline on everything. On China specifically, 34% on top of existing levies. Total effective rate, 145%. China retaliated immediately, 125% on American goods. Soybeans, which American farmers depended on selling to China, became worthless. Agricultural states panicked. Then came the real weapon: rare earth elements. China controlled 70% of global rare earth mining and 90% of processing. These weren't luxury goods, they were the nervous system of modern technology: every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every guided missile. China announced export controls. Washington froze. By May, both sides blinked. In a hotel room in Geneva, negotiators hammered out a temporary deal. Tariffs dropped to 10%. China released rare earths. American farmers got their soybean market back. Both leaders claimed total victory. Trump: I crushed them, they surrendered. Xi: we showed American hegemony means nothing. The truth? Nobody won, nobody lost. They just postponed the war. That became the pattern. Every 90 days, the truce expired. Every 90 days, tensions spiked. Stock markets gyrated. Supply chains seized. Corporate executives called emergency meetings. Then, inevitably, a phone call between Trump and Xi. Another meeting. Another extension. Another round of mutual declarations of victory. October 30, 2025, Busan, South Korea. Air Force One landed at Gimhae International Airport carrying Donald Trump, exhausted from 5 days of Asian diplomacy, ready for what his staff had billed as the meeting of the year. Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived separately, projecting the careful calm of a man who held better cards and knew it. They met for 100 minutes. No Taiwan discussion. Xi's advisors had warned against it, knowing Trump's advisors had prepared him to dodge the topic. No major semiconductor breakthroughs, no grand strategic realignment, just trade, always trade. Soybeans, China would buy 25 million metric tons annually through 2028. Rare earths, export controls suspended for 1 year. Fentanyl, China would restrict precursor chemicals. Tariffs, both sides keeping 10% baseline, down from apocalyptic highs. Trump rated it 12 out of 10. Xi said it demonstrated mutual respect and cooperation. Analysts called it a temporary calm. All were correct. All were deceiving themselves. Because beneath the diplomatic niceties, both men understood the real stakes. This wasn't about soybeans or tariffs or even rare earths. This was about the future. Who would dominate technology? Who would control supply chains? Who would set the rules for the 21st century? And most urgently, what happens to Taiwan? Taiwan, 23 million people on an island the size of Maryland. The world's most important semiconductor producer. The tripwire for World War III. Trump had spent his first term alternating between dismissing Taiwan as irrelevant and praising them as the chip people. His second term brought pressure. Move your factories to America, he told them, or we won't protect you. Taiwan's leadership understood the threat but couldn't comply. Moving TSMC's entire operation would take a decade and cost hundreds of billions. They stalled. Trump grew impatient. Xi watched all this with interest. If Trump was ambivalent about defending Taiwan, if American commitment was transactional rather than strategic, if the price of semiconductors determined the price of sovereignty, then the calculation changed. Maybe 2026 was the window. Maybe 2027 was too late. Maybe Trump, despite all his bluster, would let it happen if Xi offered him a deal. In January 2026, Chinese military exercises around Taiwan increased in frequency and intensity. Routine training, Beijing claimed. Nobody believed it. In February, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel rammed a Taiwanese patrol boat. Accident, both sides insisted. Sure. In March, cyberattacks disabled Taiwan's power grid for 6 hours. Origin unknown. Obviously, Trump's response. A phone call with Xi. We need to talk about Taiwan, he reportedly said. Xi's response, according to leaked diplomatic cables, Taiwan is China's internal affair. But let's discuss semiconductors. Translation. I'll give you chips if you give me Taiwan. Trump's team denied any such conversation occurred. But the denial came 3 days late, and nobody in Washington, Taipei, or Beijing believed it. The semiconductor issue became the pressure point Xi kept probing. America wanted access to advanced AI chips, the kind Nvidia was selling to everyone except China. Biden had imposed strict export controls, treating semiconductors as national security assets. Trump, more transactional, saw them as bargaining chips. In November 2025, he'd allowed Nvidia to sell H200 chips to China. Not the most advanced Blackwell chips, but close. It was a signal. Everything's negotiable. Xi pressed further. What about Blackwell chips? What about lifting all controls? What about technology transfer? Trump's advisors screamed no, but Trump listened to tech CEOs who wanted Chinese markets. He listened to Nvidia's CEO who wanted to sell chips. He listened to donors who had investments in China. And he asked the question his advisors dreaded. Why not? By mid-2026, the answer became clear. The Supreme Court decision on tariff legality, expected in early 2026, finally dropped in June. The ruling was narrow, technical, devastating. Trump's use of emergency economic powers to impose reciprocal tariffs violated separation of powers. Congress, not the president, controlled trade policy. The tariffs were illegal. Trump's team had prepared for this. They immediately shifted to other legal authorities. Section 232, National Security, Section 301, Unfair Trade Practices, Traditional Tariff Powers. But these were cumbersome, limited, slow. The comprehensive tariff regime Trump had built collapsed overnight. Tariff revenue, which had been generating $30 billion monthly, dropped to $10 billion. The leverage vanished. China saw opportunity. Within hours of the Supreme Court ruling, Xi's trade negotiators contacted Washington. Let's talk about a real deal. Comprehensive, long-term, mutually beneficial. The subtext. We know you just lost your weapon. Now you negotiate on our terms. Trump, facing midterm elections in November, needed a win more than ever. Republicans were defending tight margins in both chambers. The economy was sputtering, manufacturing jobs down, inflation still elevated, consumer sentiment at historic lows. His tariff strategy, which he'd marketed as the solution to everything, had delivered revenue but not prosperity. American households were paying an average $1,400 extra annually because of tariffs. They were angry. They blamed Trump, so Trump did what Trump does, he improvised. In July, he announced a new framework. The greatest trade deal in history, he called it. The details were thin, the timeline vague, the commitments non-binding. But it sounded impressive. China would invest $500 billion in American infrastructure over 10 years. America would ease semiconductor restrictions. Both sides would cap tariffs at 10% permanently. Technology transfer would be mutually beneficial. Taiwan wasn't mentioned. That last omission terrified Taipei. They'd watched Trump and Xi dance around the Taiwan question for 18 months. They'd endured American pressure to relocate factories while facing Chinese military intimidation. Now, in the middle of a comprehensive trade deal negotiation, nobody was talking about defending them. Taiwan's president gave a speech that went viral globally. We will defend ourselves. With or without allies, because we have no choice. The American foreign policy establishment revolted. Former officials from both parties published joint letters warning that abandoning Taiwan would destroy American credibility, embolden China, and trigger a cascade of authoritarian expansion globally. Senators introduced legislation requiring the president to defend Taiwan militarily if attacked. Trump dismissed it all as deep state hysteria, but within his administration, a civil war raged. The hardliners, led by figures who'd spent careers viewing China as an existential threat, argued that any comprehensive deal that didn't address Taiwan was surrender. The transactionalists, led by Trump himself and business-oriented advisors, argued that forcing a confrontation over Taiwan would destroy the global economy and accomplish nothing. Taiwan, they insisted, could be defended through ambiguity rather than commitment. Xi understood all this. His intelligence services had penetrated deep enough into American policy debates to know exactly where the divisions lay. So he made his move. In August 2026, he invited Trump to Beijing for a summit. Not a meeting, a summit, state visit, full honors, global spotlight. The message: come to Beijing, shake my hand, sign a deal, declare victory before your midterms. All you have to do is not mention Taiwan. Trump wanted to accept immediately. His advisors stalled. They spent 3 weeks negotiating the terms of the visit. What would be discussed, what wouldn't, what joint statements would say, what ambiguities would be preserved. The final compromise was classic diplomatic non-speak. Both sides committed to peaceful resolution of all disputes and respect for international law and norms. It meant nothing. It meant everything. It let both sides claim whatever they wanted. The visit was scheduled for October 15, 2026. But something happened before Trump could board Air Force One. On October 3, Taiwan held military exercises simulating defense against Chinese invasion. Nothing unusual, they'd done this annually for decades. Except this time, they invited American observers, and Japanese observers, and Australian observers. A coalition, a signal, we're not alone. China responded with fury. Provocative actions by separatist forces, Beijing declared. Clear violation of One China principle. But everyone knew what it really meant. Taiwan was calling Trump's bluff. If America was going to abandon them through ambiguity, they'd force clarification through action. Come defend us or admit you won't. Trump's Beijing summit was postponed. Scheduling conflicts, both sides claimed. Sure, the midterm elections loomed 3 weeks away. American voters went to the polls not knowing if their country would defend Taiwan, not knowing if the trade war would end or escalate, not knowing if the fragile truce would survive past November 10 when it expired again. outcome was closer than anyone predicted, a near-perfect split. Democrats gained seats in the House. Republicans held the Senate by one vote. Neither side had a mandate. America remained divided. Trump, watching results from the White House, tweeted, "Big win. The American people support my China policy." Democrats tweeted, "America rejected Trump's chaos." Both were lying. America had simply shrugged, exhausted by the whole thing. November 10th arrived, the truce expiration date. Would Trump extend it again? Would Xi agree? The world watched. Markets held their breath, and at 6 a.m. Washington time, Trump posted on Truth Social, "Just spoke with President Xi. Great conversation. Trade talks continuing. Details soon. America winning." No details came. No extension was announced. No new deal emerged. Just ambiguity. The tariffs that were legal remained. The ones struck down by courts vanished. New negotiations started. Old arguments continued. The $30 billion monthly tariff revenue dropped to $12 billion. Not enough to replace income taxes, as Trump had once fantasized, but enough to be painful. China's economy, meanwhile, showed surprising resilience. Global trade actually expanded by $500 billion in the first half of 2025, despite tariffs, volatility, and geopolitical tensions. China's trade surplus hit $1.2 trillion, a record. How? By selling to everyone else. When American markets became expensive, China pivoted to Europe, Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America. Chinese companies moved up the value chain, producing higher quality goods that justified higher prices. The tariffs that were supposed to break China's export model instead accelerated its evolution. American manufacturers, meanwhile, struggled. The manufacturing sector lost 14,000 jobs in May and June 2025 combined. Plants didn't reopen, factories didn't return. Some companies moved production from China to Vietnam or Mexico. But costs still rose. Automation replaced workers. Supply chains remained fragile. The great manufacturing renaissance Trump had promised never materialized. By December 2026, the pattern was clear. America and China were locked in what analysts called managed competition, an endless cycle of escalation and de-escalation, threats and truces, crisis and calm. Neither side wanted war. Neither side wanted peace. Both wanted advantage, so they kept dancing, kept negotiating, kept pretending that next time, finally, there would be a real deal. But there wouldn't be, because the fundamental question remained unanswered. Can two superpowers share the world? Or must one dominate? Trump believed in zero-sum. America wins, China loses. That's how deals work. That's how life works. Sharing is weakness. Compromise is surrender. So every negotiation became a test of wills, every concession a humiliation to be reversed, every agreement temporary until circumstances change. Xi believed in patience. The east wind prevails over the west wind, Mao had said 70 years earlier. Xi updated it for modern times. Let America exhaust itself with chaos while China builds quietly. Let Trump tweet while China invests in infrastructure. Let Washington argue while Beijing advances. Time, Xi believed, was on China's side. America's political dysfunction, its social fractures, its inability to plan beyond the next election, these were advantages no tariff could overcome. So 2026 ended the way it began, with uncertainty, with tension, with both sides claiming victory and preparing for the next round, with Taiwan holding its breath, with global markets gyrating, with supply chains adapting, with the future undecided. In 2027, everyone had predictions. Few agreed. The optimists saw the trade war cooling as both sides tired of conflict. The pessimists saw Taiwan as the inevitable flashpoint. The realists saw more of the same, muddling through crisis management, short-term deals, long-term rivalry. But everyone agreed on one thing: the relationship between America and China, the world's two largest economies, two most powerful militaries, two most ambitious nations, would define the 21st century. And right now, in late 2026, nobody was defining it. They were just reacting to it, day by day, crisis by crisis, tweet by tweet. In that Beijing conference room, the 5 officials reconvened in December. What happened? Asked the diplomat. Nothing, said the intelligence officer. Which is something. We're still here. They're still there. Taiwan is still autonomous. Trade continues. That's not victory, but it's not defeat. Yet, added the military officer. 2027 is coming. And Trump will be weaker after midterms. And our military modernization continues. And their political chaos intensifies. The window is opening. The trade official pulled out a chart showing export numbers. We're winning the economic competition. Their tariffs hurt their consumers more than our exporters. We're diversifying markets. They're not. Time is our advantage. The technology officer shook his head. Unless they solve semiconductors, if they truly decouple from our supply chains, if they build domestic chip production at scale, they don't need us. Then Taiwan becomes irrelevant to them. Then they can move. So what do we do? Asked the diplomat. The 5 men looked at each other. Nobody had an answer. Because in 2026, in the competition between America and China, there were no answers. Only questions, only scenarios, only preparations for a future that might never come or might arrive tomorrow. We wait, said the eldest official, the intelligence veteran who'd watched empires rise and fall for 4 decades. We build, we adapt, we watch Trump stumble through his domestic crisis. We watch their elections, we watch Taiwan, and when the moment comes, if it comes, we decide. Decide what? Asked the youngest. Whether to push, whether to wait, whether the risk is worth the prize. He paused, looking out the window at Beijing's skyline, glittering with the wealth of 1.4 billion people emerging into modernity. Whether China's century begins in 2027, or whether we wait another 20 years for America to collapse on its own. 12 time zones away, in a Pentagon conference room, American officials were having the exact same conversation. And reaching the exact same conclusion. Welcome to 2026. The year nothing was resolved. The year everything remained possible. The year 2 superpowers discovered that winning the future wasn't about defeating the other. It was about surviving the present. One deal at a time. One crisis at a time. One day at a time. And somewhere, on a small island in the Taiwan Strait, 23 million people watched the dragon and the eagle circle each other endlessly, never fighting, never fleeing, just circling. And they understood what the superpowers were still learning. In modern war, the greatest danger isn't losing. It's winning. Because the costs are so catastrophic that victory and defeat look the same. So the dance continues. Trump tweets. Xi plans. Taiwan builds submarines. Farmers plant soybeans. Factories make chips. Markets rise and fall. Diplomats draft statements. Generals update war plans. Economists revise forecasts. And the world spins on, hoping that tomorrow will look like today, that the deals will hold, that the truces will last, that somehow, impossibly, the 2 giants will learn to share a planet that suddenly feels too small for both of them. 2026 doesn't answer the question. It just makes it more urgent. Because 2027 is coming. And the dance can't last forever. Eventually, one of them will step on the other's toes. Eventually, someone will flinch. Eventually, the music stops. And when it does, will they shake hands? Or will they finally discover what everyone fears? That they've been preparing for war while pretending to negotiate peace. That all the deals were just pauses between rounds. That the competition was never economic. It was always existential. It was always about who leads and who follows. Who rises and who fades. Who defines the future and who lives in someone else's past. November 10, 2027, is still a year away. But it's coming. And when it arrives, Trump and Xi will face the same choice they faced in 2025 and 2026. Extend the truce or let it expire. Make another temporary deal or force a permanent resolution. Keep dancing or finally stop the music. Neither man knows what he'll do. Neither man knows what the other will do. Neither man knows if what they decide will matter, because events have a way of deciding for themselves. Taiwan might move, China might push, America might draw a line. And then? Nobody knows. Nobody wants to know, because the knowing is the terrifying part. So they dance, and the world watches, and 2026 becomes 2027 becomes 2028. And the question remains, and the answer stays hidden. And the future refuses to arrive, staying always just out of reach, just over the horizon, just one more deal away. Until it isn't.